my title is herding cats. As everybody else got assigned these things, and you'd look at it and go, okay, what do they really want me to talk about? I guess they want me to talk about how much fun it was extracting data from the scientists. So I've got a few slides here, but I'll probably not get to those till later because the herding cats really doesn't lend itself well to pictures, and it would be extremely boring if I was to show that. But the key with Boreas was back to the experiment plan, like they were talking about yesterday. All the planning, all the work that Forrest and Piers did to pull this, I pulled it out the other night, and it almost exhausted me just looking at this. Like all the work that went into that, the aircraft flight plans, the site layouts, all the teams, where they were going to go and when, and it's all prescribed in there. And there were appendices, they kept growing too, and they were like appendices through P. But that was all the work that went into planning that. It just made everybody's job easier when it came to getting into the field and doing stuff. And you could look it up in the X plan. It actually made our jobs easier too when it came to getting data, because it was also prescribed in there what the deliverables were for all the teams. So we were all given one of the discipline groups. I had remote sensing science. There were 20 of those teams, but Fred had tower flux, Tracy had aircraft flux meteorology. We were all given these teams, and it was our job to, as that representative, to make sure they delivered their data and to coordinate with them. And so I was involved in FIFE. I processed a ton of data, but I think I went in the field, like Don said, he wanted everybody to get out there and see it. So I went to one IFC, and I didn't really know what was going on. I remember going into CNOPS, going into one of the labs, watching these guys making measurements of grass in the lab. I don't remember seeing the towers, but maybe I just didn't notice because they were nothing like the ones in Boreas. I think that's the first time I remember seeing Piers in action, the nightly weather report and plans for the next day. And I know he was around in the lab. I don't remember him much before FIFE, though. And he was this really young kid, and he was running this. He was help running this. I didn't, and Piers always looked younger than he was, so he really looked like a kid. And I remember Forrest down in the bar in the all seasons playing pool, and he was pretty good at that. But
did he look young?
Okay, my hair was black back then, and Forrest was white, and but I look at those pictures, and he does look young, but I think I hung around Forrest and Richard Cuenca a little too long. And, but anyway, so I don't remember a whole bunch about FIFE except processing a lot of satellite data. And we had a really nice sequence of ETM in 1987 and a bunch of spot data. A lot of that was cloudy, and some Cosmos data. But mostly what I remember with FIFE is sharing an office with Diana and Fred and Dave. And Dave's computer kept saying, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." It was really, really annoying.
Too many mistakes.
And Diana, super sweet, talking to all these people who were calling her for data, and I couldn't have done that. I didn't have the patience and the sweetness that she did. But mostly I was processing satellite data and working on radiometric rectification so that we could look at all these data and work with all of them together. That was my memory of FIFE. But Boreas is something that all of us who were with FIFE we kind of got pulled into, and there was a ton of work ahead of time that was involved. A lot of, in addition to the reconnaissance, we were developing relationships with the Canadians, working with CCRS, working with Forestry Canada, working with Natural Resources Canada, getting these data sets, trying to getting the imagery that we'd use to try and find the tower sites. And I remember going into the field. I was involved in some of that early on, and this is 92-ish, 91, 92, and we'd find a site. I remember one time in the south, we were still focusing in Prince Albert Park, and getting dropped into a site with a helicopter. We had multiple teams, and I had 3 or 4 Canadians with me, and we'd be told to go in this direction and send up a balloon. We had helium with us. Send a balloon into the canopy, hope it didn't pop before it went above, and then Piers and Forrest would fly by, and we had radios, and how does this look? And they'd say, oh, about 300 meters off in this cardinal direction. Try and send up another balloon, and that was part of the process of finding these sites and finding something that was homogeneous, and that was kind of fun.
That was our pin drop.
Yes. Well, things were done differently, like Don said. We didn't. There's a lot of tools that we have today that we didn't have back then. But anyway, all the prep work, everything that went into it. We did the experiment in '94, and then we got these assignments. We had to work with the science teams, but like I said, the key things that we had was the X plan. Forrest and Piers leadership. We had meetings every Monday at 10 o'clock, 2 hours long usually, but they kept us informed. The communication was great. We had a great team. And we'd go around the table, and everybody had a voice, and everybody, if you had a problem getting stuff from somebody, if it was dire, we'd try and enlist their help because people were ignoring us. But eventually, it all worked, and the formats were prescribed, the units were prescribed, and sometimes that wasn't followed, but we worked with these teams, and another key thing was that we had relationships with these people because we did go in the field. We went to the science team meetings, and we interacted with them over a long period of time, and that was really important. Because you weren't just a face in an email. I mean, you were not just a name and an email address. You had a face, you had a personality, and you had a relationship with them, and so they felt a little more guilty. True. Really, you could compel them to give you something a whole lot better, having that relationship. So. That's my memory of Boreas, and getting the data. It all eventually came in, and we'd go back and forth with scientists. The hardest part was the documentation, though. We had a document. It wasn't fun to do, I know, because we ended up having to do them for some of them who wouldn't necessarily comply, and. So we'd do what we could. We knew the instruments they were using. We had maybe from, another team was doing it, and we'd cut and paste and put something together. And sometimes it was easier to get them to respond to something that we presented if they weren't able to generate it themselves. But having the teams working directly with these people, like Don said, the longer it was before they got data, we got data, the harder it was to document it. They forgot, they move on, whatever. So it was kind of good to have each of these teams poking at these guys and making sure that all this stuff came in. So anyway, that was and in the end, you end up with this big, huge data set that's well documented, usable. I thought we did a pretty good job. We worked with the scientists, and I think, tied up with a bow, sent it off to ORNL. That always felt really good. And they worked the metadata stuff, and things had come along at that point. So now you have this stuff in there that you can search by parameter and all. So kudos to everybody for all your efforts, and to Forrest and Piers for their leadership and making sure everything got done. It was a huge job. And we couldn't have done it without them and their leadership. So I have just a really few pictures. So this was my one trip to Kansas. I got to fly in the C-130. This is Jim Irons' crack ASAP's team. Jim wasn't there because he was having a baby. So
Actually, my wife.
I think everybody knew that one. So this is Ned Horning and Rich Irish, who work with Charlie Walthall. He was here yesterday. I don't think he's here today. I hung around the window because I found this whole experience kind of unsettling, being in an airplane without being able to look out the window. And it was this big lumbering aircraft. It was really loud, and I didn't enjoy it a whole lot. And I'm used to looking at this view, and so I hung around the window. But yeah, there were two big reservoirs in there, and then Boreas. And I had a baby in late 93, so 94 I wasn't out in the field too much until the end. This was, I got to go out to Old Black Spruce, which I hadn't been to before, with Richard. And we didn't have the bug nets and stuff. I forget what month it was, but the mosquitoes were there. And I got to experience that full on, and getting back in the car afterwards, it was like 10 minutes of smashing them against the window and against the ceiling, and blood stains all over the place. And this was, Richard was super proud of his dirty car afterwards. Like, it was so much cleaner than mine. This is Dave Herring, who was at Pissue Falls. Scott couldn't quite remember yesterday. He was back he was at Goddard at the time and helped out with me and the NSA during this '96. He's now running climate.org at NOAA. And this is Amy and I. We were really bored in '96 during the fall, and we decided to deliver some TDR rods, I think, for Richard's that had come to Paddockwood, and so we stopped by Paddockwood, picked them up, set off the alarm, couldn't figure out how to turn it off. That seemed like a little disaster, but we got out there, and I learned that riding a bike in a narrow aspen site with trees all around with a TDR rod across your handlebars was not a really good idea. But this is Joe Barry and some of the Old Black Spruce guys in the South. We had a spaghetti dinner. I don't remember who these guys were. Maybe you recognize them.
A lot of bottles on the table.
Spaghetti and wine, and what's Boreas without a little libation? And this was our last night there, and Piers was already at the astronaut corps, but he somehow came up to the that Keith took over for us. And this was after Amy and I were riding into Old Aspen. So I want to share one more thing. Do you have a few minutes, Forrest? Am I cutting into your coffee break?
Maybe like 1 minute.
1 minute? Uh-oh. Well, I want to share this with Piers. This was a memo, and I don't know if you remember this, Dawn. This was somewhere between Fife and Boreas. And this wasn't always the way we communicated, but it's kind of funny. Handwritten from Piers to Dawn. It was called, the title was Boundary Layer Cloud Dimension. And this is what it says. It says, Dawn, the fight over MODIS spatial resolution continues, with the EOS management position being that 1 kilometer is okay for most scientists, but 1 kilometer is okay, and most scientists pleading, and he crossed that out, pleading for 250 meters. And at this point, we need to prove, and he does prove that, he crossed that out, says demonstrate, better word, that boundary layer clouds can really screw you if you look at 1 kilometer resolution. So, do we have a SNOT image? That's what Pierce called SPOT. Or a Landsat image with QPOP in it, and could it be degraded to 250 meters and 1 kilometer resolution? And after that, he writes, this would be a good one to win. And he CC'd Chris Justice, who I know with John Townsend were really pushing 250 meter. And they were afraid that the data system couldn't handle it, 250 meter, too much volume. And this was early on, and who knows where technology would have been. And obviously it was something he won, and was able to persevere and convince Dixon Butler that this was something that was important, and just another persevering on behalf of these scientists for 250 meters. Otherwise we'd be stuck with a 1 kilometer sensor, and we'd have a lot less information today. So another nod to Piers and his impact on Earth observing. That's it. Just wanted to share that. Thank you.